Hey everyone, I'm Joseph Lichterman. We are here in our second module of the newsletter course on how to launch a newsletter. And I'm here today with Jacqué Palmer, the Senior Content Strategist of Newsletters at Gannett. And she is going to walk us through her experience launching a particular newsletter with one of Gannett's papers. And we're going to get right into it. So we're going to be talking today about a newsletter called Florida Time, which is a newsletter that Jacqué helped launch. And so to start, I was hoping you might be able to give me a bit of background on the newsletter and tell us about its origins and how you guys started thinking about it.
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, I started pitching this newsletter product first strategy to anyone in the newsroom who would listen to me. I was fairly new in media. I have a background in marketing and business and audience development. And everybody in the newsroom was like, oh, whatever, what is she talking about newsletter? It's just, another kind of distribution channel that's not giving us big numbers and we just don't care about it. So Samantha Ragland was the first one to bite. And she was like, tell me more about this product, newsletter first strategy of yours. And I pitched this idea of day tripping to her, which would be written and produced by Julio Poletti, who was one of her writers at the time. And what he did with that newsletter was he went up and down the state of Florida taking day trips with his dog Chunky. And then he'd come back and he'd tell the newsletter audience, okay, so I went to these beautiful springs up in North Florida. Here's everything you need to know. This is how much it's going to cost you. There was a lot of shade for Chunky, and Chunky had his own section in the newsletter where he would give you like one paw if it was really bad experience for him, or 4 paws. He would tell you if there was plenty of space for him to use the bathroom, all kinds of like interactive elements in the newsletter. Of course, once that hit it off and they saw that there was an audience and Julio was getting all of this promotion and all of this traffic to his newsletter, everyone in the newsroom was like, I want a newsletter. So that really changed the way that we started thinking about newsletters in the newsroom at the Palm Beach Post in West Palm Beach. So then 2 years in, we took our newsletter strategy and we started thinking about the state of Florida and how we were going to scale that out and think about it on a regional scale. Elliot Kleinberg, which was a veteran reporter, 25 plus years at the Palm Beach Post and a Florida history buff, came to Samantha and said, hey, I want my own newsletter about Florida history. And the data already showed us that our audience loves Florida history, nostalgic-based content. So we were like, absolutely, tell us what you need to make it happen for you. And so that's the background story of how Florida Time kind of came to be.
That's so interesting. And I'd be curious, what type of data and what sort of insights were you looking at to make you realize, oh, there's an audience here who might be interested in it?
Yeah, so we pulled up Google Analytics and we were able to see that a lot of the search traffic, a lot of social traffic, a lot of, first-time visits to the site were to his Florida history content. People were spending more time reading the stories, and those stories, tagged as Florida history, and then moving on to reading other stories as well. So we knew that this was a viable beat in a niche product that would sustain an audience's attention over a long period of time. And this was 1,000 plus articles that he had already written. So we had a lot of data-rich information to help us prove, to leadership, hey, this is actually a really good idea for us to really just take and brand out and build out in the newsletter space.
Oh, awesome. And so once you took the look at the data and thought, okay, this is a good idea, that something we should do as a newsletter, sort of what were the next steps? Did you do any additional kind of research or testing, or sort of how did you start to build out the product?
Okay, so next step was, number one, you always got to go to their editor and make sure that their editor is on board and that they're going to allocate and allow for the reporter to really give us some of their time. And us, meaning I was on the audience and content team on the newsletter side, and Samantha Ragland, who was the director of content for the Florida Audience Hub, she was more on social and website. So we were able to take that idea from him, but in conjunction with working with him, to build out the name, the branding, the marketing, the strategy, And then they handed it over to me where I designed the actual email and talked about different sections and elements and interactivity and talked about, should we really ask for questions from the audience? Like, what is the UGC play here? Because newsletters is not this communication tool where you're just talking at your audience. Is very much this back and forth conversation. And that's the only way it's going to be successful for you, especially if you're doing like a pop-up style niche specific newsletter like a Florida Time. So it was a lot of things, but the first thing that we did was we needed to think about what's this going to be called, because the audience, the data is telling us that this audience is predominantly boomer, white male, college educated, that currently likes to read, the paper, the Palm Beach Post. So from there, we needed to make sure that it wasn't something that was too punny, but something that made sense and that they would really resonate with that audience. So then we thought about colors and branding, and we brought in the design team and the marketing team, and we talked about logos, and we created we brought in color palettes and ideas and, old nostalgic photos, black and white photos, and alligators, and just all kind of Florida mosh posh of things that we thought would really make sense in a Florida history sense. And then we said, designer, marketing, do your magic. And so they came back with a whole bunch of ideas for logos and wingbacks and all kinds of like little icons and things for the social elements and for the print ads. And that's when we really got excited, because we were like, yay, ideas is something actually solid that you could see as a brand and that we know that the audience is going to then buy into. And then from there, I took those elements and I coded them into the template. And then I just put together a couple of articles and a couple of sections, like a classified section, a reader rewind section, that we then kind of did a 2.0 iteration and turned into an audio podcast element. We had news from across the state. So, all of that was in the template. And then we talked about workflow and production, lead gen campaigns. So it's a whole production, but it's so much fun. And you just take it really step by step, look at the data, pay attention to what the data is telling you and whether that is a good topic and newsletter idea. Take a look at everybody's workflow, take a look at the resources you have available to you, tap out and reach out into other teams to see if they can kind of chip in and help you with certain elements, and then just go for it and launch it and see what happens.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I'd love to dive into some of those specific steps, because figuring out those logistics is so important to actually, because you want to be able to, if you're going to start a newsletter, actually be able to publish on a regular cadence and sort of deliver to the reader, right? So you want to make sure that the workflow is there and it's actually something you're able to deliver on that value proposition almost. So I'd be curious to hear more about what those conversations with editors were like and with the staff to figure out, okay, how is this something we can add to sort of our already existing workload, and what that process has been like?
Right. So that's a really good point. Before I get into that, you did say something about a unique value proposition, and that is something that's going to be crucial to how you keep reminding yourself how you're serving the audience via this platform and via this channel. So if you ever want to think, oh, hey, we should do this. Okay, let's go back to our unique value proposition. Does it match? And are we serving the audience within the constraints of workflow and production and resources? I just wanted to pinpoint that. But the conversations were, hey, we think that this is going to bring more page views, more, conversions and subscriptions. This effort, which is not going to take a lot of time off of the reporter's plate. This is how and why. It only takes them about an hour out of their week to write this brief introduction section. Here are some examples of what that looks like from other newsletters that we're pulling ideas from. And it would only take your reporter 1 hour of time. And that 1 hour of time is going to turn into these XYZ metrics. We're going to see open rates. We expect to see this amount of open rates, which turns into this amount of clicks, which turns into this amount of page views, which turns into these retention numbers, these conversion numbers, and these subscription numbers at the end. This is the bottom line. And not that every newsletter play is a subscription play, because that's not always the case. And every newsletter play is not also a traffic play. Newsletters do really, really well at engaging your already loyal and subscriber-based audience. So those that are already paying for you. They do really well in helping you serve underserved communities and audiences that you're not really talking to in a more intimate way, to build that trust and authority within those communities, so that down the line, you might get them to convert. And they also do really, really well at retention and loyalty, which can save you so much more down the road than new starts that just come kind of from nowhere and no product to support that new start. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So making a real business case for the newsletter that this
Yes.
is going to serve our overall goals and won't be a huge lift sort of work-wise.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with reporters, because I know that they're being asked to do so many things, and it's really hard to come to them and get them excited about a newsletter product when they're looking at it and you're training them on the system or wherever it may be, and they're like, no, 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 no. If I have to learn one more thing, I'm not doing it. So if you can get that out of their way and really provide additional support via a producer and an editor, and then hopefully somebody on the technical side like me who can come in and take all those pieces and execute it for them, that would just make it a lot easier for them to do. So just make their job easier, try to figure out production and workflow, really look around and say, hey, I can write this, but can you produce it for me? And can you send it? And, just have kind of like a team and a system set up so that we're all successful and that we can all really hit our goals and hit these metrics.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. Also, that it's not just writing the newsletter, but producing it takes time, sending it takes time. You want to be able to test it and see how it looks in the inbox before you send it out. So work there as well.
Yeah. And content strategy and planning strategy. Those are the things that people don't talk about. A newsletter is not just about writing the newsletter. You have to have a fully mapped out content calendar and strategy for what now. You're sending a newsletter for a year. Have we even looked at the numbers in the past 3 months? What's happening? Our audience, are they tuned out? Are they tuned in? Are they sharing? Are we, taking the time to look at the data and then talk about, okay, hey, let's talk about the next 3 months that are coming up. What are the holidays that we're going to come up on? What is some evergreen content that we can tap into to kind of take the load off of us having to write fresh content every week or every month? Mm-hmm. So, strategy is really important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things you've talked about a bit is sort of success metrics. And not every newsletter needs to be sort of a subscription play, but did you approach this Florida Time newsletter as a subscription play? Sort of, was that the key metric you were working toward?
Yeah, we were hoping to really turn this into its own platform and have a subscription model underneath. It was really our intention to show that with these newsletter first products, that these could be standalone verticals that could support the current subscription model that the newspapers have, or that they, as their own external, you could subscribe for these, and they're provided by your local paper, or as an added value benefit under your current subscription. And that's currently where they sit. But we are in talks again of Florida Time 2.0. What does that look like? Can we really launch a vertical platform with its own subscription model? And, what kind of resources is that going to take? And how do we make that work?
That's fascinating. But taking a step back, one of the other things I wanted to ask about, sort of as you prepared to launch the newsletter, it's sort of, you need an audience and you need readers to actually read the newsletter. I'd be curious sort of how you went about promoting the newsletter and sort of starting to build that readership.
That is my favorite part. So if you don't, you're probably not going to have an audience to convert. So the first step and recommendation that I would make is to tap into your core audience currently. And so through your legacy staple newsletter product, let's say your morning headlines or your daily briefing or your newsletter, most legacy media companies and local papers have that staple newsletter list, which is their largest. So I would recommend talking directly to them and inviting them over into this new newsletter product, really getting them excited about it and really pushing for that sign up from your core audience. Then from there, I would flesh out a full, grassroots kind of marketing plan. Where is this audience? Really develop a persona. Who am I talking to? I want you to give that person a name. I want you to pull a photo from a stock website. I want you to think about what kind of Netflix show this person watches and binges on, if that's even a thing they do. Maybe they're not that kind of person. Maybe they love to go work out or hike or run, or maybe they're a social butterfly and they love to go have cocktails even in the middle of a pandemic. Like maybe they just don't care. Like you really have to get into the shoes of who your audience is. Once you figure that out, then you will know where you can allocate your resources for lead gen. So if you know that they read the Ann Friedman weekly newsletter, check out her advertising and ad placement rates and see if you could put a couple of ads within her newsletter. If they are coffee connoisseurs, this is a coffee connoisseur kind of newsletter for your local city, why don't you go ahead and put up some flyers across all of the coffee shops in town with like a text to sign up, functionality within that flyer. You could put ads in your local paper as well. You can partner with other community organizations that have a newsletter list or that have community events where you can make sure that they're speaking and letting the attendees know that you have a newsletter and just giving them the information on how they can sign up. If they listen to certain podcasts, you can look and see what kind of advertising rates and offerings that they have and put in some commercials in those podcasts. So really start thinking like a marketer. Start thinking about, well, if this was me, where could you get my attention? And then start planning out how you're going to make that happen and reach out to your marketing team and see if they have budget for something like this. Trust me, there's always budget somewhere. You just got to get the right person excited and put some really great ideas in front of them so that they can get behind it.
No, that's awesome. Those are great ideas. And so with Florida Time, how did you approach it and what strategies did you use for this particular newsletter?
So for Florida Time, because it was an older bloomer audience, we did a lot of print ads. We did some quizzes on the website that was Florida history based, which got the nerds really involved and excited. We had some text to sign up business cards and these really cool Florida history nostalgic postcards that had the text to sign up functionality in there that we mailed out. We, I believe Elliot had done, this was before COVID, Elliot had done a couple of town hall presentations and he gets hired for speaking engagements. And so we made sure that he had the text to sign up information so that every time he went and spoke somewhere, he would let them know, hey, by the way, I have this really cool newsletter. All you have to do is text Florida Time to whatever the code was to sign up for the newsletter. And it would get those leads really straight to my inbox. And I would go ahead and import those leads into the Salesforce CRM. And let me see what else we did. Oh, we also allocated budget to paid acquisition efforts via Facebook. And if you're going to do that, what I do want to recommend is that you wait until you have a solid engaged list of about 1,000 people who are opening and engaging with your list so that you can then download that list and do a lookalike audience in Facebook so that you're really getting your bang for your buck as far as who it is you're targeting. Because if you kind of go into Facebook and just make it, just kind of put your ads in front of anyone, that can really hurt your list if you're inputting people who are not matching your core engaged audience base into your list, because then they're going to start to unsubscribe. They'll get the newsletter and be like, what is this? This is not for me. And so they'll really start to tank your metrics, and you do not want that to happen, especially if you get advertising on board and they start selling sponsorships and packages to and within your newsletter, because then they want to make sure that, that our advertisers are getting what they're paying for in a healthy list and in healthy open and click rates. So those are some of the strategies that we use for Florida Time.
Yeah, that's terrific. And yeah, very smart with the lookalike audience as a way to sort of make sure you're reaching the appropriate readership. You mentioned this in your email to me as we were preparing for this, that you're now 100 issues into to Florida
Yeah.
Times and at it for a while. And we will get into this in future sessions of the course, that it's not just about launching a newsletter, but also that you have to maintain and iterate. And so I'd be curious if there was feedback or data you saw from that initial launch and in that early period that has helped you as the newsletter has evolved.
Okay, so in the early period, I don't actually depend too much on those metrics, and I'll tell you why. Because your first couple hundred of signups are going to be your really close kind of niche audience. It's going to be people in the company. It's going to be friend of friends. And those people are usually always going to open and interact with your newsletter. You want to take a look at your last maybe 4 to 6 weeks of engaged, whatever that list size is. That's kind of the data you want to look at moving forward when you're planning out your content, because that is your current audience right now. If you were to take a snapshot, that is currently engaging consistently with your product. But overall, I will tell you that this audience just loves nostalgic content. The data showed us that they love photo galleries of natural disasters and Hollywood starlets, and they love calling into the Reader Rewind call-in line to talk about department stores that used to be and are no longer, around, and that they feel kind of sad about it. Or this one woman called in about the Orange Bowl parade, and I was like, oh my God, I remember the Orange Bowl parade. Those are things that people want to talk about and share, and it's also what others want to listen. So those were 2 really popular Reader Rewind episodes about the old department store and the Orange Bowl parade. And then we all love a good murder story, right? The data showed us that they really love the Lonely Hearts murder and the Judge Chillingworth murder that happened in Manalapan. So yeah, it's just those are the kind of stories that the data was showing us that they really enjoy. So we want to make sure that whenever we're planning out the calendar for the future, that we kind of tap back into like a throwback Thursday of, hey, remember this issue? Or here is, a roundup of the top 10 cold case murders in Florida that you may not know of, and really tap into what they already love, what they already have told us that they love, right? And another really crucial thing that the data was telling us, and not so much in open and click rates, but in user feedback, is it drives home a really good point. So with Florida history, for this particular audience, anytime we mention the KKK or racism or, lives of Black Americans in the past, it really hit a nerve for some readers. Now, we could have been like, okay, this is, no zone. We do not want to keep sending this kind of content because they are not responding well. But that is our job. If the UVP, the value proposition for this newsletter and the importance of this content is to make sure that we are correctly and accurately sharing Florida history and all its good and all its glamour, its ugly and its bad, then we have to make sure that we're talking about that too, even if we get a couple of, subscribers that are like, I don't want to read about that, or why do you keep talking about this? So I think that's really important too, depending on your beat, that you kind of sometimes have to stand your ground and do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That at the end of the day, you're still a journalist and you got to use your editorial sort of discretion regardless of what the data tells you. Well, excellent. I think that answers all my questions. Is there anything else we should know, or maybe anything I missed?
About starting and launching your own newsletter? Yeah, you know what? I would leave you with this. We all write about, we all think that the things that we're writing about are great, right? Because if we didn't, we wouldn't be writing about them. But really think about the audience first. Think about who wants to read this and why. And just start there. Really think about, I'm writing about this, so who would want to read that? And then look into doing the research for that audience, and then really building out your plan and making your case for why you should start this newsletter.
Well, that's a great way to end it and great advice to leave us with. Well, Jackie, thank you so much for making the time and for speaking with us.
You're
And
welcome.
we really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.